In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to import records into monday.com and then also connect them to something else if there is an existing relationship, and I'll walk you through everything. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up monday.com for your business, check out the link in the description below. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm inside of my example monday.com system. Now, in the example today, I'm going to be importing contacts into monday.com. This entire process from start to finish works for literally anything. This is just an example. Now, you'll notice here I've got some extremely rudimentary data. I've got a full name, first name, last name, email, a phone number. I might even get rid of the phone number because I don't think I've got any on my example spreadsheet. And then I've got an account ID and then an account connection column. Now, this is important, okay? This basic stuff, this is really simple. This is where it gets slightly more complicated, because with an account ID or an ID of any description, there are many instances when doing an import, I want to connect the record on one board to the record on another board, okay? The problem with imports inside of monday.com is I can't connect a contact to CRM Crew or connect a contact to Apple directly via the import. So I need a means of associating the contact with the account. Now, in an instance like this, we're using something called an account ID, okay? Now, if you are lucky enough to have this, then great. There are other alternative options that I'll walk you through in this video. But the idea being that we've imported our account. So let's say, first and foremost, we're setting up our CRM system or whatever the case may be. I've imported all of my accounts. So I've got all accounts up here, and each account has its own unique reference number. I can see CRM Crew has 12345, very generic, and Apple has 54321. And then this obviously code or ID or reference is associated with each account. And then we have a connection column to then associate a contact record with an account where the account ID would match, okay? So I'm going to walk you through the import first because it's getting confusing, and then I'll go through the connecting bit. So in order to import, go to the arrow in the top left-hand corner here and then go to import contacts, and then drag and drop or just select the file that you would like to import from, or import, I guess. You've got import demo here. I'm just going to go ahead and select that as my option. And then it's going to upload depending on the size of the file. Might take a little while to upload. And then all you need to do is go ahead and press next. Now, choosing a column that you want to map to the item name. So item name is this first column here. We can't change it. We can't edit it. We can't do anything with it. So on my Excel spreadsheet, and just for a breakdown, by the way, at the top, the first row, I've got the actual name of the column. So full name, first name, last name, email address, and account ID. Those are just in bold, as you would expect. And then each line item underneath that is an actual record. So I've got 3 records. I've got myself, I've got Alex, and I've got Tim Cook from Apple. We're frequently associated in the same conversations. So item name is going to be the full name on my Excel spreadsheet. Obviously, you just need to select whatever the name of the item is going to be from your Excel spreadsheet, and then go ahead and press next. The next thing we then need to do is map the columns from our Excel spreadsheet to the columns inside of monday.com. So monday.com tries to do this automatically, and in all fairness, it has done a really good job because the naming convention of the columns on the Excel spreadsheet are exactly the same as the naming conventions of the columns inside of monday.com. However, if there is minor variance, Monday might struggle to pick that up. So you can see first name, this is from the Excel spreadsheet, map to the column that we can select when mapping that data point to within monday.com. So in this case, it is first name. Same with last name, we would select that. If there was no selection, we would just need to choose the column and then say, yes, this is the last name. So first name, last name, email, and account ID. As you can see here is a little warning to you. Unmapped columns will not be imported. So just bear that in mind. If you're not going to map anything, it's not going to automatically create a new column for you. It's just going to go ahead and assume you didn't want it. So just bear that in mind. So we can then go ahead and press next. But before we do, actually, good point. Up the top here, we can choose whether we want to exclude the first row of a spreadsheet from the import. So like I said, you've got these are my columns, full name, first name, last name, email. That would be row 1 because we're excluding the first row. We've unselected exclude the first row from the spreadsheet import. Whereas if I select this, now my first row is actually the second row in the spreadsheet. Hopefully that makes sense, okay? So first name, last name, full name, blah, 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 blah. And then go ahead and press next. So now we've got a few different options. This is mainly regarding duplicates within monday.com. So Either we can just create new contact records irrespective of whether they already exist inside of the system or not. So create new items. So this would mean that if you've already got Nick at crmcrew.com in as a contact, it's just going to create another Nick at crmcrew.com, which is not ideal in my opinion. So we're left with two options. Now, you obviously don't need to worry about these two options if you're importing for the first time. The probability of duplicates is less likely. Well, you would hope so anyway, right? But you've then got, if there is a concern with duplicates, two other options. We can either skip items. So don't add an item if the data from the Excel matches this column. You need to select this column. The best, this column, is a unique reference of some description. Now, the only great unique reference we have here is an email address. There can never be two of the same email address for different people, right? You could have the same name, Tom Smith, whatever the case may be. That could happen and frequently happens. So you can't rely on a full name. Also, if there's a Tom Smith, a Thomas Smith, they're the same person with the same email address. So use a unique reference number, typically either an email or a phone number. In this instance, it would skip over the item. So if you had myself inside of the system already and I was trying to import myself again, it would just not do anything in the sense that it would just skip past it. So Nick at crmcrew.com has been identified here, so we're not going to do that import at all. Okay, we're not going to update any information, nothing is going to happen. Whereas you can overwrite existing items if you want to. So overwrite the whole item if the data from the Excel matches this column. So this is essentially saying that if the email from the import matches an email inside of your Monday.com system, then it's going to overwrite the data. Essentially saying that it would add more data, it would update the data, it would update the first name, the last name, it would potentially update the full name, phone number, whatever, based on the email column matching. Okay, so if in your Monday system you didn't have first name and last name for let's say Nick Boardman, you just had full name and you had the email address, overwriting existing items would then add the first name and the last name as well. Okay, so choose which one you want. It's entirely up to you, dependent on your use case. I'm just going to go ahead and press create new items to keep things simple. And then all we need to do is press start import, and all that happens is the new records are created. So those are our three records. They've come in very nicely. We've got full name, first name, last name, email, account ID. Alex, same thing. Tim, same thing. What you will notice here, and I find this a bit frustrating, is when you do an import within Monday.com, it creates a new group. I've got no idea why. It just won't add it to existing groups that you've already set up. So quite frequently, what I would do is I would press mass select of that group, and then I would go to move to group, and then all contacts. So we would move those records to the all contacts group. And then what I would do typically is just delete that group that came in. So you can get rid of it if you want to, which I would typically tend to do. Now, the next thing you will notice, and so now we've done the import, and that was really easy, right? Congratulations, if that's all you wanted from this video. The next thing we want to then look at, right, is the account ID and the accounts and the contacts connecting based on the account ID. So you will see here that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for Alex and myself match 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for CRM Crew account. In the same way that 54321 for Tim Cook matches 54321 for Apple. Okay, so what we need to do is find a means of automatically associating the account or the contact with the account based on the account ID. What we need to do in an instance like this is create something called a trigger. So there's two things. We need to create a status column, and we also need to go ahead and create an automation. So first and foremost, status column, we'll just call this trigger, okay? And this is only gonna be a temporary solution, okay? We will delete this column in due course. So settings, hide column summary. Doesn't matter what labels you've got as long as you've got one option that you can select, okay? Then we need to go to automate and then create and manage. And then we need to go to connected and mirror columns on the left-hand side here. And then we are looking for when status changes to something, when column changes, connect this item where this column matches this column in another board by this logic. This is what we're looking for. When column being trigger, changes, connect this column, account ID, where the account ID matches the accounts, I think is what we called it, in the other column, in the other board. So when trigger column changes, connect via the connection column where the item, connect the item, sorry, where the account ID on the contacts board matches the account ID in the accounts board. Okay, so we've selected the accounts board. We've then selected the account ID from the accounts board and obviously the account ID from the contacts board. And then we've used the connection column that already exists between contacts and accounts to facilitate the connection. And then this is our trigger. The trigger is the trigger column. Okay. And then all we need to do is go ahead and press create automation. And it's really that simple. So all we need to do now is just change the status of the trigger to something. It changes, right? This will then cause the automation to run, which will then connect the account to the contact. So what I would do in an instance like this, when I've done an import, is I would mass select and then mass update the column, which is the trigger column. That should then trigger the automation for each of these records, thus connecting the accounts to, or connecting the contacts to, the relevant account, which it has done now. So now I've done that, I can go ahead and delete my trigger column. And also I would just go ahead and delete my automation as well. Or you can keep it turned off if you want to. You can keep the trigger column if you want. I don't need it. So now I've done the import. I've connected the accounts or the contacts to the account based on the account ID. There's an argument to say that I could even delete the account ID column if I wanted to. That's entirely up to you. But now I've got the import done, the connection associated, all via the account ID. Now, an alternative method for you to do this is based on the domain. This is quite a nice one, actually. So what you can do is, if you don't have the luxury of an account ID, which some imports don't, as long as you've got the domain name for each account, so we could go text here, and the domain name being, let's say, Nick, so it'd be crmcrew.com. And then Apple would be apple.com, right? It's a pretty straightforward domain. So domain for each account, which is what we want. Domain. There we go. Cool. So now, if I just clear that, we've got a domain. This is now another form of unique referencing. So what we can then do is we can create a text column, and then we can use AI to extract the domain from the email. So we go text, 3-dotted button, and then we go to autofill this column, extract text. Then the text, we are extracting the domain name from the email address. So domain from email, and just press save and apply. But also, you probably can't see it because of my big head, but there is a small tick box button down here. It says apply also to 3 empty existing items. Make sure that you have that ticked, because if you've just done an import, you will want to apply this to the import as well, which is existing items. Now, if you want to be extra fancy, my recommendation is to do this ahead of time in the Excel spreadsheet. I think you can write a formula to say that anything past the @ within the email column is then extracted or casted into a new column. So I do believe that's possible. It will save you on AI credits if you can do it in the Excel spreadsheet, by the way, and then just go ahead and press save and apply. So what should now happen is the domain from each of the emails for each of the contact records should be extracted and put into this text column here, subject to monday.com working, which it has done. So now we could treat this column here as our unique reference. Then we would apply exactly the same logic that we did for the account ID, the status, this being our trigger. And then we would go to automate, and then connected mirrors and columns. And then when column changes, connect the item where when column changes, connect the item where this column matches another column in another board by this logic. So then we run through exactly the same. When the trigger changes, connect, or at least we want the accounts board, and then we want another column being the domain where this column matches the domain, or I think we didn't change the name of the column, so it's just text column, and via this connection column. So when the trigger changes, connect the item where the domain matches the domain in the accounts by this logic, create automation. Okay. So now, if I go ahead and just remove these connections, just for example's sake, I'll mass select, change the status, which triggers the automations to run to automatically connect the accounts to the contacts, or the contacts to the accounts, based on the text column, which is essentially the domain matching. So if you don't have an account ID, which is quite often a luxury, you don't necessarily need it. You can use the domain as well. My recommendation is to extract the domain of the email of the contacts at the Excel level, not the monday.com level. But if you haven't done that, you can do it using AI credits, but it is going to cost you, if you've got thousands and thousands of records, you only get a very small number of AI credits So just bear that in mind. And that's pretty much how I would do it. So then I can go ahead and delete my trigger column. I can go ahead and then delete that automation again. And then you can choose what you want to keep on the contact side of things. Either you can keep the text column, keep the account ID, or what we're calling the domain. I don't know why I didn't change the name here. Or you can delete them both. It's entirely up to you. But that is how to connect an import to another import. Now that specific logic only applies to contacts and accounts relationships, whereas the account ID, client ID, record ID, this could be applied to more generic scenarios where you're doing imports and trying to connect records on one board to records on another board. Anyway, hopefully this has given you a decent idea as to how to import records into monday.com or items into monday.com, the options you have available. It's relatively easy to do the import. I even think that connecting stuff's pretty easy as well, as long as you know what you're doing. Thank you ever so much for watching. Hopefully this video was helpful. If you would like us to help you, stats@monday.com for your business, check out the link in the description below. Thank you and goodbye.